agendas, that our intellectual agendas may differ, and that not anything goes. Thank you.
Thank you. As I sit here listening to the talks and conversations, I think I have a kind of identity crisis. On the one hand, I think I'm a scientist because that was my early graduate school training. I'm a theoretical linguist. And my work till about 1990 was strictly within that small area of competence. And then I moved out of that area of competence, started asking questions about the philosophy of linguistics and the epistemology of linguistics. And I started thinking, maybe I'm an amateur philosopher, but none of the philosophers would accept me as a philosopher. And then my interest then expanded to the epistemology and philosophy of academic inquiry in general. Again, this would not be treated as philosophy by philosophers. Along with that also was my interest in education. I got interested in the concept of general education and how we can do that, and it was tied up with my interest in academic inquiry. So I became a kind of amateur educationist. And I'm struggling with these three identities right now. And what I have to say has to do with what comes out of the work from these three identities. There are two related problems that I would like to address. One is epistemic, and that has to do with the fragmentation of academia because of fragmentation in academic inquiry, which means fragmentation in terms of methodologies, in terms of criteria of evaluation, in terms of what constitutes knowledge, etc. And this occurs not only between natural sciences and human sciences or humanities, but also within each disciplines, for example, as in, within anthropology, between the physical anthropology and the cultural anthropology, within sociology, between positivists and interpretivists, and within linguistics, there'll be at least something like 16 different camps. So I feel that I'm in a domain where there is a lot of tribal warfare going on. There is the pragmatic problem that I would like to address is the conflict at the socio-religious levels, and I don't have to say anything about the conflicts that we are witnessing today. And I have been worried about these two problems and how to combine them, solutions to these. The solution to the first problem of the epistemic fragmentation is, for me, has been to construct a general theory or general framework or model for academic knowledge and inquiry such that the kind of fundamental unity can be grasped at the level of the fundamental notions that Paul mentioned. But at the same time indicating how this is manifested in details in the derived ways, and how those derived ways in fact constitute reasons for conflict. The pragmatic solution is in terms of education, and my idea is to educate students in terms of the thinking within academic inquiry across different disciplines, help them understand the nature of academic inquiry and knowledge, and then use that understanding to deal with questions about moral value and religious faith. That is, bring in questions of moral value and religious faith within the boundaries of academic inquiry itself. So the scope of this work that I would like to do covers three areas: belief, values, and practices. And these are interconnected notions. Now, I would like to clarify what I mean by belief, and one part of belief which is important for me. There are three aspects of belief that I'm interested in. One is knowledge, by which what I mean is the kinds of things, the propositions that we regard as true beyond reasonable doubt. Opinions would be the next, where the confidence in the certainty would be much less. And opinions is a domain where if you subscribe to one opinion and somebody else subscribes to the opposite opinion, it is not necessary for you to regard the other person as wrong. In the case of knowledge, that is not the case. Both knowledge and opinions are subject to the condition of rational justification. The third category of belief, namely faith, is a set of beliefs which cannot be justified in themselves because they act as the foundations for other beliefs. So they are not subject to rational justification condition. So if I believe that the world exists outside of my consciousness, I can't think of a way of justifying that belief. If I think that the world is a manifestation of some transcendental sacred, I can't think of a way of justifying it. These are all matters of faith, could be secular faith or religious faith. I put them in the same category, as opposed to blind faith, which is a very different category, which doesn't come into academic inquiry. There are two canons that I would like to enunciate for this investigation of belief, practices, and values. One is, as I think these canons are fairly uncontroversial and accepted by all academics. One is our practices, our beliefs, our knowledge and opinions, that is, should be subject to justification. The second canon is the totality of the values, practices, and beliefs, and this time the beliefs would also include faith, must be maximally coherent or consilient within themselves as well as across beliefs, across values, and so on. If you stick to these two canons of academic inquiry, then there are two obvious questions that we would like to ask about values and faith. One is it feasible and desirable to extend these canons of inquiry and justification to moral values and religious faith? And the second question is it feasible and desirable for institutions of secondary and tertiary education to include in their curriculum moral inquiry and religious inquiry as forms of academic inquiry? I don't mean to say by religious inquiry, I don't mean to say something like theology, but it's religious inquiry as practiced within academia. And my answer is definitely yes. And this is what I have been trying to do in my own practices of education. Now, obviously, if you do this, we cannot expect immediate consensus and immediate solution to all the problems. What we can do through this extension is to create a mindset and habits of mind such that students are led to question authority, are led to have a sense of fallibility of knowledge, are led to ask questions, and so on. The kinds of things that we associate with academic inquiry, and bring those things into their moral judgments, into their religious faith. And that, I think, is an important factor. The advantage of doing that is they become then, to some extent, protected against various forms of indoctrination. And one form of indoctrination would be from, of course, religious indoctrination. The other would be moral indoctrination from society. And the third would be indoctrination by the governments. And the fourth would be indoctrination, propaganda by corporations. And finally, not necessarily the least important, indoctrination by us academics. When I educate my students, it is very important that they have the power to resist my indoctrination, because I may be doing this without my knowing. And I think it is possible to take this approach and protect our students against all these forms of indoctrination. Why is this protection important? Because these people, the young people, will become the leaders of some of these avenues, some of these aspects of society, government, corporation, and so on. Others would become followers, and yet others would be citizens who would be challenging, who would be in a position to govern, to at least shape, influence these forms of power. And I think this is probably where our future lies. By giving the young generation the power to protect themselves against those who are in power. So, to summarize, this is what I have tried to say. I think it is feasible and desirable to develop an integrated academic knowledge and inquiry, a model of academic knowledge and inquiry that functions as a kind of infrastructure in multidisciplinary research for academic purposes, such that we can connect across different academic pursuits that are currently difficult to integrate. They are in fragments. That's the pure aspect. And the applied aspect will be, it is both feasible and desirable to use that structure to extend the mindset and habits of mind associated with academic inquiry to questions of moral values and religious faith in the context of secondary and tertiary education. Thank you.
I'm going now to invite a quick response around.